All right, before we took the break, I was talking to you about the defendant's story, his stories in this particular case. As was said a number of times in the course of this trial, details matter. And in a case like this, details matter very much. As also said, the truth is easier to remember than a lie. And when somebody fabricates a story, their story eventually changes over time because they can't keep track of what they've said before, and that's what happened in this particular case. Now, at some point, I'm going to talk to you very specifically about those passages, those items in the defendant's story that changed over time. Things that he said that changed from statement to statement. Things that he said that changed while he was making a statement that particular day. And things that simply do not match up with the other evidence in this particular case. And things that just simply don't make sense. But before I do that, I want to go back and I want to talk to you about the law that the judge will give you in this particular case. And as I do that, I want to go through and I want to explain to you exactly the evidence that has been presented to you in this case, how it fits with the law, and how you should make your decisions in this particular case. Now, with everything, the charges in this particular case start with the indictment. And as you learned very early in this case, the defendant is charged with 4 crimes in this particular case. In count 1, the defendant is charged with the first-degree murder of Toledo Otto. In count 2, he's charged with first-degree murder of Michael Otto. In count 3, he's charged with the second-degree murder of Yesenia Suarez. And in count 4, he's charged with tampering with physical evidence. And I want to go through each of these and talk to you about what the state has to prove in this particular case to prove each of these crimes and how we've been able to do that. In count 1, which is the first-degree murder of Michael Otto, the judge will tell you that to prove the crime of first-degree premeditated murder, the state must prove the following 3 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 1, that Michael Otto is dead. Number 2, that the death was caused by the criminal act of Luis Toledo. And number 3, that there was a premeditated killing of Michael Otto. In count 2, the first-degree murder of Talia Otto, those elements are exactly the same. Number 1, that Talia Otto is dead. Number 2, that the death was caused by the criminal act of Luis Toledo. And number 3, that there was a premeditated killing of Talia Otto. In count 4, the second-degree murder of Yesenia Suarez, the judge will tell you that to prove the crime of second-degree murder, the state must prove the following 3 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 1, that Yesenia Suarez is dead. Number 2, that the death was caused by the criminal act of Luis Toledo. And number 3, that there was an unlawful killing of Yesenia Suarez by an act eminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard to human life. You will notice that in each of these first 3 counts, the first and second elements are exactly the same. Number 1, that the victims are dead, and number 2, that their deaths were caused by the criminal act of Luis Toledo. It is only with regard to the third element that the elements are different. And so I want to talk to you first about the first element in counts 1, 2, and 3 of the indictment, and that is that the victims are dead. Now, in most murder cases, the fact that the victim is dead is very easily established. And that is because a body has been found, someone has been able to examine the body, has been able to determine how the person was killed, when they were killed, and so on and so forth. In this particular case, as you know, the bodies of Yesenia Suarez, Michael Otto, and Talia Otto have never been found. And so, unlike most cases, it is our job to prove to you that in this case, despite the fact that there are no bodies, that the victims are in fact dead. And we have proven that to you beyond a reasonable doubt through the following evidence. Number 1, you heard from Yesenia Suarez's mother and her friend. You've heard that there has been no contact from any of them, Yesenia Suarez or the children. There's been no contact with the family or friends for over 4 years. Number 2, that this was a family that was very, very close, extremely close. You heard testimony from Felicia Perez that she and her daughter spoke by phone at least every day, at least once a day. And since then, there has been no contact whatsoever. Felicia Perez told you that she's called Yesenia Suarez numerous times with no response. Yesenia Suarez, a big family, the testimony was that she would not leave that family without telling someone. The defendant in his interview even says, quote, "My wife doesn't do moves like that. If that many people have been calling her, she's going to call." Family was very large. The testimony and the evidence in this particular case is that Yesenia would have felt comfortable going to any of her family if she felt she needed a place to go. And even the defendant says the same thing in his interviews, that if she needed a place to go, that she would go to Sabrina, her best friend, or she would go to her mother's. So what other evidence have we presented to you that the victims in this particular case are dead? Well, there's been no activity on any of Yesenia's bank accounts or credit cards or her credit records. From October the 23rd, 2013, there's been no activity other than her paycheck from her prior work being deposited into her account or service fees that her bank charged her accounts. There's been no activity. No new credit cards taken out, no new transactions, nothing for over 4 years. You heard testimony from Detective Brian Ford, who told you that when they were reported missing, that a nationwide be on the lookout was issued, and that since that time there's been no law enforcement has not crossed paths with Yesenia Suarez or her children for over 4 years. You heard testimony from Felicia Perez that their family went on the news frequently after the disappearance of her daughter and grandchildren, pleading with anyone with information to come forward. Still, no contact from the victims. Also, you can consider the unlikelihood in this particular case that all three of these individuals, all three of them would disappear alive at the same time, and no one would see at least one of them for over 4 years. You heard evidence from Ron Nathan that the children's last day of school is October the 22nd, the day before their disappearance, and they never returned to school after that. You heard his testimony that their school has never once received any requests from another school for their school records, which is typical when a student transfers from one school to another. What other evidence has been presented to you that Yesenia Suarez, Talia, and Michael Otto are dead in this case? Well, Yesenia Suarez's car was left behind. Her purse and all the items located in it were left behind. Her cell phone was left behind. Neighbors across the street heard a female yelling, "Help me, help me," several times late in the night from the general vicinity of Yesenia Suarez's house. You heard testimony from Leroy Parker and Josh Mott about bloodstains that were found inside Yesenia Suarez and the defendant's home. Leroy Parker told you that he analyzed those bloodstains and concluded that there were multiple impact and cast-off bloodstains that were found in 3 locations within the defendant's master bedroom and the bathroom. And this is important, 3 locations. He testified that those 3 locations showed forceful bloodshed events, and that each of those locations got lower and lower to the floor as it moved further into the bathroom, and that the last bloodstains that were found were deposited on or near the floor. And you heard testimony from the DNA analyst that those bloodstains matched the DNA profile of Talia Otto. And also that Talia Otto's blood and DNA was found on the trunk mat and on the defendant's boots that were thrown into the dumpster at Lake Jenny. What other evidence has been shown to you that the victims in this particular case are dead? Well, Yesenia Suarez had a good job. She was considered by her boss as a superior and excellent employee. You heard his testimony to that effect. She didn't resign. She wasn't terminated. She simply disappeared. You heard testimony from Felicia Perez that Yesenia Suarez was attending college and was just months from graduating with her bachelor's degree, which was very important to her. You heard testimony, and you saw photographs of Yesenia Suarez's house. She left behind a household full of possessions, family photos, clothes, her luggage, backpacks belonging to the children, toiletry items, computers, electronic devices, toys, and furniture. She left everything behind. And then lastly, we know that the victims are dead because the defendant says that he was there and they're dead. So the state has proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt element 1 of both counts 1, 2, and 3. So let's talk about element 2 of counts 1, 2, and 3, and that is that the death was caused by the criminal act of Luis Toledo. And let's make no mistake here. After hearing all of the evidence, there's only one of two conclusions that can be drawn in this particular case. There's only one of two people that could have done this, and that is Luis Toledo or Tyshawn Jackson. And I submit to you that the evidence proves that it was not Tyshawn Jackson. But the evidence does not show that. It makes no sense to reach that conclusion, that it was the defendant in this particular case that killed Yesenia Suarez and the children. First, the evidence in this particular case is regarding his guilty behavior. You know, he lied and told the police he didn't know where the victims were. And then the next day, when he knew that things were closing in on him, he changed his story and said, yeah, they're dead. You heard evidence that he attempted to clean the house, try to clean all of the blood from the master bathroom and the master bedroom. You heard evidence that he solicited Tyshawn Jackson's help early in the morning of October the 23rd to move Yesenia Suarez's car to a grocery store parking lot in another county. Parking the car, he wiped it down with a rag and a bottle cleaner, and that he removed items from her car, including the trunk mat that contained evidence on it. And then he dumped the trunk mat, his boots, the bottle cleaner, clothes, and other items in a dumpster at an apartment complex. He dumped the rainbow vacuum cleaner and Talia Otto's stuffed animals in another dumpster. These are not the actions of an innocent man. These are the action of someone who knows that he committed these crimes and he's trying to cover his tracks. There's evidence in this particular case that's been presented to you concerning that connects the crime specifically to the defendant. Again, we talked about this before, that the boots with Talia Otto's blood and DNA on them are the defendant's. They are his size. His neighbor saw him wearing the boots. And in his interview, the defendant specifically, when shown a picture of the boots, said those boots were his. Boots that had Talia Otto's blood and DNA on them. The clothes that were found in the same dumpster are his. And we know this because he also admits that as well, but also we know that because a garage door opener that was found in the pocket of those sweatpants was found to be covered with the defendant's DNA. The plastic. If you remember, the defendant described the plastic that he says that Tyshawn Jackson used to cover the front seat when he, as the defendant claims, went and dumped the bodies of Yesenia Suarez and the children. The plastic that was found in that same dumpster had shoe prints on it that matched the defendant. They were the same size, the same design. The motive in this particular case shows that this was a crime that was committed by the defendant. The defendant was the only person with a real motive to kill the victims. At the time, you saw evidence. The defendant admits this. You see it in the text messages. His marriage was deteriorating. He and Yesenia were involved in verbal altercations back and forth with the text messages. Days before, she had informed him that she wanted a divorce. And the day before, and timing is important in this particular case, the day before her and the children disappear, the defendant discovers that she is having an affair with a coworker. The evidence shows that he angrily confronted her and the coworker about the affair at the job site. He was very angry about it. He insisted that her employer know that they were whoring around. He was angry because she admitted the affair to him but denied it to everyone else. Also, in this case, the evidence that's been presented to you that shows that these crimes were committed by the defendant are the defendant's own statements. The defendant admits to killing Yesenia Suarez by striking her in the throat. Now, he denies killing the children, but admits that they came into the room immediately after he killed his wife, asking, "What's wrong with mommy? Who's dying?" And it's at that point that they were witnesses to this particular crime and said who it was that was there in the house. Also, we know that he was the one that committed these crimes based on his multiple inconsistencies in his statements, the nonsensical explanations that he gives, the fact that no evidence supports his story and much of it contradicts. And that evidence shows that he and he alone was the one that murdered Michael and Talia Otto. So let's talk about those inconsistencies. One of which is on the question of whether he had been in Yesenia Suarez's car the night before. On October the 23rd, 2013, in that interview, the defendant, when asked, said it was impossible for someone to have seen him in his wife's car, and says, "I didn't take the car nowhere." He said he didn't drive his wife's car, he didn't drop it off, he didn't wipe it down. He said he did not ask someone to follow him and give him a ride back home when he dropped the car off. And then we know that the next day, he changed that story. More inconsistencies by the defendant on where his family was and who was in his house the night. And we've already talked about this. In that October 23rd interview, he said he left at 1 a.m. He comes back. He parks in the driveway. He falls asleep at 3 a.m. He wakes up at 8 o'clock in the morning and finds that they're gone. He has no idea where he's at. In the same interview, he said that no one else was at his house the night before. And he said that things did not become physical between him and his wife. The next day, he changed that story and admitted that he lied about that. More inconsistencies by the defendant in his statements. More consistencies on when he said he first saw Tyshawn Jackson that night and what he was doing. In his interview on October the 23rd, he said that he saw Tyshawn Jackson pulling up at 9 o'clock and 1 a.m. And when he was specifically asked, he specifically denied seeing Tyshawn Jackson at 3 a.m. The next day, on October the 24th, he said that Tyshawn pulled up around 2 or 3 in the morning. In the same interview, he changed his story, and it wasn't that Tyshawn was pulling up. He said he saw Tyshawn come out the front of his house with a flashlight. And in the same interview, he then later said that he saw Tyshawn come out of the house with Mr. Biggs, the dog, and that Mr. Biggs sleeps with the defendant. We heard testimony from Tyshawn's mother says that's not true. Mr. Biggs sleeps with me. I'm the one that lets him out, not Tyshawn. Here, within 24 hours, the defendant is changing his story. He can't keep it straight on when he saw Tyshawn Jackson and what he was doing. Details matter. More inconsistencies in the defendant's statement on where his cell phone was during the time of the murder and the cleanup. On October the 23rd, he said that Yesenia Suarez took his phone after their argument, after the phone call with Kevin Dredden, and he got mad and he left. He says that she took his phone away from him because she was afraid that he would call Kevin Dredden. And he said that he didn't have it when he left for work the next morning because she had taken it. But on October the 24th, he told investigators that it was in his car. And he thinks Tyshawn took it when they went to dump the car off. Again, he can't keep his story straight. More inconsistencies by the defendant on how Tyshawn wound up going into the defendant's home. And this explanation, not only inconsistent, it just simply doesn't make any sense whatsoever. He said in the interview on October the 24th, when he's blaming all this stuff on Tyshawn Jackson, he said that he saw Tyshawn Jackson at 3 o'clock, again, inconsistent with what he said before, and that Tyshawn Jackson accepted his invitation to come into his house at 3 o'clock in the morning to play PlayStation 3 with him. And not only to come inside of his house to play his video games, but to come into his bedroom where his wife was sleeping at 3 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. He said he told Tyshawn I don't care if she gets upset. Come on, let's go. And he said that Tyshawn Jackson, he accepted that invitation. They walk into the house. He walks into the bedroom with him. He turns the light on. And he said that when Yesenia saw Tyshawn, that's when she went off. And he even said that before she went crazy, that Tyshawn grabbed one of the PlayStation 3 remotes. And if you remember from the crime scene photographs taken by Josh Mott, the PlayStation 3 remote control was found in an armoire inside the master bedroom on the other side of the room in a corner. It meant that Tyshawn Jackson had to go fully into the room, walk across the room, and touch and grab the PlayStation 3 remote control in the bedroom at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, you heard Tyshawn Jackson. He said that he's been over the defendant's house, and he's seen Yesenia Suarez get upset on occasions. And he says whenever that happens, he's uncomfortable. He gets really uncomfortable, and he leaves. The defendant, the day before, on October the 23rd, also told a story to the investigators about how Yesenia Suarez got upset one day about some car repairs that her father was doing for them. And there was some dispute about the fact that they thought it was one problem, and they get in there and they find a whole bunch of other problems, and I don't know, it cost a bunch of more money or what, but she was very upset about this, and Tyshawn Jackson was present when she got upset. And the defendant said that Tyshawn Jackson, she blew up so bad that Tyshawn Jackson got uncomfortable. Even the defendant says, this is not something that a normal person does. Yeah, okay, I'll go inside your house. It's 3 o'clock in the morning? Sure, no problem. What, you want to go in your bedroom and play video games while your wife is sleeping? Sure, that doesn't sound like a problem at all. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. More inconsistencies by the defendant on why he went back into the house and what led up to the killing of his wife. On October the 24th, he said, fuck it. I know my wife hates when I play PlayStation 3. That's her most hated thing. She hates that. So I told Tyshawn, fuck it. We ought to go in the house and play. I don't care if she gets upset. He said, I was pissed. I was trying to get her upset. He's telling Tyshawn Jackson this. And Tyshawn Jackson just, oh, sure, no problem. We'll go, we'll have a good time. And then later in the same interview, he says, I should have never went inside. I should have just slept in the car like I always do. I really felt like she needed another chance. Well, which is it? Which is it? Were you going in there to get her upset, to make her mad? Or were you going in there to give her another chance? Which was it? He can't keep his story straight, ladies and gentlemen. More inconsistencies on why he went back in the house and what led up to the killing of his wife. You heard the testimony of Sabrina Newell, and you heard the phone call that he had with her on May the 2nd of 2015. And in that phone call, he tells a very different story of what occurred in the house that night. His story had nothing to do with the video game and why Yesenia Suarez went off on him. What he told Sabrina Newell on May 2nd of 2015, that when they got into an argument, she says, you need to get the fuck out. And he was like, yo, you're acting like a real, you know what? He told Sabrina Newell, you know she hates that word. And she's like, yeah, I'm a real good, you know what? A real good blank too. And she says, I'm such a good hole, that's why I sucked his blank. And you know she doesn't do that. I said, yeah, you sucked his blank. I said, well, you remember when I was in Alabama, when you was in Alabama, that Nani, which Sabrina Newell says is Yesenia Suarez's sister Emily, says, well, you was in Alabama, Nani came over here, remember, yeah, that's why her blank tastes like Skittles. And that set her off the roof. That's why she started coming at me, attacking me. Then everything else happened from there. And then he says, I can't keep talking about it because I'm already talking too much. He's telling a completely different story of what occurred that night. A story that makes complete sense when you stop and think about everything that led up to that night. And then suddenly him and his wife get into an argument, and she throws this in his face, and it drives him over the edge. More inconsistencies statements by the defendant. Whether he cleaned the house. We've heard this before. The 23rd, he said the house smelled good that morning. It didn't smell like last night. On the 23rd, he said the last time he cleaned the house was about a week ago. But on the 24th, he admits, I cleaned everything. He said he used whatever chemicals were in the kitchen to clean the bathroom. He said the cleaning product smelled by the deputies was from the cleanup. He said the house is really, really dirty, and that's why he had to use the rainbow. And he also described wiping down the walls, removing the rug, scrubbing the shower and tub with a green scrub pad, and used mean green, Pine Sol, and other detergents in the rainbow. More inconsistent statements by the defendant on who was with him when he dumped the rainbow. On October the 24th, he said that after Tyshawn Jackson came back from the first trip, the alleged first trip, after he dumped the bodies and some of the other stuff, he says, we dumped the rainbow. I dumped that stuff right there. He was referring to photographs that the investigators had showed him of the rainbow vacuum cleaner. I dumped that stuff right there with him. In the same interview, he says Tyshawn was not with him when he dumped the rainbow and the stuffed animals. He dumped it after he had already dropped Tyshawn off at the 9/11, and that statement was true. Tyshawn Jackson, said that there was only one trip where we dumped stuff off. He can't keep his story straight. He said that he realized the rainbow was still at the house after he dropped Tyshawn Jackson off. More inconsistent statements by the defendant on who decided to dump the truck mat from Yesenia Suarez's black Honda. On October the 24th, he said after they dumped the rainbow, I told him we got to go back, because this piece here, he's referring to photos of the trunk mat, was going to show them where that they were in the trunk, and we went back to get it. He says that I said, we got to go back and get this thing. In the same interview, he said, Tyshawn told me to turn around because he forgot the trunk piece. So I went back and picked it up, and I wiped it down and put it in the back seat. Again, he cannot keep his story straight. More inconsistent statements by the defendant on when and where he got rid of Yesenia Suarez's ring. And I don't know that you may have heard this, but if you listen to that interview, he talks about getting rid of Yesenia Suarez's ring, how he went to her job and he confiscated it. And he says that on his October 24th interview, he said that Tyshawn told him to throw his wife's ring over the I-4 bridge going into Seminole County. He said he threw it from the left lane. In the same interview, he said that when he was driving back home, now going into Seminole County is when they're going to dump the car. And then he says in the same interview that they're driving back home on Highway 1792, not on I-4, but 1792, that Tyshawn saw the rings and told him to get rid of them over the bridge. Almost immediately after he says it, he changes it up and says they were not going home, but they were going towards Sanford on 1792. And he said that when they were going to get rid of the car, they were driving all the way up and down 1792. Which was it? Was it I-4? Was it 1792? He can't keep his story straight. And what's more, saying that he was going towards Seminole or Sanford, and Tyshawn Jackson sees the ring and tells him you need to get rid of the rings, was a problem with that. And that's because when they were driving the car to dump the car in Seminole County, he was in the black Honda and Tyshawn Jackson was in the silver Saturn. How could Tyshawn Jackson tell him to get rid of the rings on his way to Seminole County? It's not possible. He says they didn't have cell phones, so there was no telephone conversation. It doesn't make any sense. And he's changing his story. And this is the same interview. The same interview. He says, we're on I-4. No, we're on 1792. He can't keep his story straight. On the knife, we've already talked about this. On the 23rd, he saw the knife in the photo and said it was his, so he saw it 2 days ago. There will be no reason why it wouldn't be in his house. And then on the 24th, he admitted that he threw the knife out the window. Now, a note about this knife. It is true that there is no forensic evidence that connects the knife to this particular crime. And so you may ask, what's so important about the knife? I know that question has been asked several times and probably asked of you again. Some arguments will probably be made about that. But here's the important thing about the knife. Number one, why is the defendant throwing it out? Number two, we don't know how the victims were killed. We don't know that because the defendant disposed of that evidence. We don't know. We have to accept at some level some of his statements about how they died, some of which sort of strains credulity, talking about how he karate chopped his wife to the throat and she immediately died with one blow. But we don't know. We know they're dead, and we know that from the evidence the defendant killed them, we don't know how he killed them, other than what he said. We also know that the defendant cleaned up and did a pretty good job cleaning up. It wasn't a perfect cleanup job. He left some of Talia Otto's blood behind, but he cleaned up the crime scene. And so we don't know. Why is he throwing the knife out the window? Even if the knife wasn't a part of the crime, it certainly shows a guilty mind. Other evidence that's been presented to you in this particular case that shows that the death of these victims were caused by the criminal act of Luis Toledo were statements that he gave that are inconsistent not just with his own statements, but are inconsistent with the evidence in the case. He said that he left Felicia Perez's house and went straight home and started packing, and Yesenia came home shortly thereafter, and they discussed separating or staying together. And he didn't leave until she refused to tell Kevin Dredden's wife about the affair. We talked about this already. He left her, you heard testimony that he left her house around 6:30, but there was no evidence in the house. You saw the pictures from the crime scene, the house. You heard testimony from Josh Mott, the crime scene investigator. There was no evidence other than it packing. The only luggage that was found out and about was Yesenia's purple suitcase that she had used for a trip to Alabama. And of course, we know from the phone records that that's not true because Yesenia Suarez is at home calling him over and over and over again and texting him saying, "I'm here, where are you?" It also shows that his phone was turned off at 6:28 p.m. Other evidence, other statements by the defendant that are inconsistent with the evidence in this particular case. The defendant said that while all this cleanup was going on, that Tyshawn went and grabbed some garbage bags over the sink. They went into the house, they found a box of garbage bags, and they dusted them for prints, but Tyshawn Jackson's prints were not found on the box of garbage bags. He said that Tyshawn Jackson drove the black Honda to dump the bodies and other evidence, but neither Tyshawn Jackson's prints nor DNA was found in the black Honda. He said that Tyshawn Jackson, again, this is something we covered, that he covered the front seat of the Honda with plastic all the way down the floor. The only shoe impressions on that piece of plastic had the same size, shape, and design as the defendant's right Timberland boot. The defendant also said that before they went to dump the car off, that he vacuumed the Honda real good with the rainbow before taking it to dump off. But there was a sandy footprint found in the rear floorboard of that Honda, which also, amazingly, a sandy footprint was found in such pristine condition that a footwear impression analyst was able to determine that it had the same size, shape, and design as the defendant's right Timberland boot, just like the shoe wear impressions on the plastic sheet. More statements by the defendant that are inconsistent with the evidence in this particular case. He said that Tyshawn Jackson, this is part of the story, when Tyshawn Jackson was there and Yesenia and the kids were killed and they were in the process of cleaning up and getting rid of evidence. He said that initially Tyshawn Jackson was wearing Nike tennis shoes, faded jeans, a black and yellow t-shirt with a graphic design. And then after he goes off on one of these trips, he comes back and he's wearing a black t-shirt, basketball shorts, and slides. And the video from 7-Eleven shows that Tyshawn Jackson's not wearing any of that. He's wearing a gray tank top. He's not wearing a black shirt. You would think that that was something that the defendant would get right. I mean, Tyshawn J. did get his help to move the car, but no. Then, more evidence that's inconsistent with the evidence. He said he went to his brother's house to get him to help move Yesenia's car. And he says that he dropped off Tyshawn. He said he did that after he dropped off Tyshawn around 8 o'clock. But his own flesh and blood brother says that's not true. that he came to his house between 5 and 5:30. He also said that he returned home in the morning of October the 23rd because his gas light indicator had come on and he left his money at home. But investigators went a year and a half, learned that he had a quarter of a tank of gas in that car. And his gas indicator light was not on. Was his interview that the defendant committed these crimes based on all of the evidence that I've just laid out for you. Interview 2013 should remove any doubt whatsoever that not only did so his two children. If you remember from that interview, and if you remember from the video, while he's sitting there hunched over, and he's looking at photographs. And the day before, if you remember, he was upset about, his description of events. And he was asked, "Do you want me to take the photographs away?" He goes, "No, I want to remember them this way." As you look in this, if you watch this video, you get the sense that their faces are haunting him. He's looking at those photographs for a long period of time. Now, the cynic would say, because he requested this meeting with the investigators, he knew full well what he was going to do. And he knew that one day somebody would see it and maybe feel sorry for him. But I submit to you, when you watch that video very carefully, you get the sense that he hasn't had any sleep in 2 days. He says he's looking at those pictures of his wife and his children. How they looked when they took their last breaths. And so he asked the investigators at one point, tells them, "I need to go to the bathroom." And they stand there with the door and they monitor him because he's in custody. He comes back to the interview room and they talk some more. And you can sense there's discussions about the gator pits. And you can tell from the conversation that that's not really why he's there. Because they're asking him questions and he's giving very short answers. He's not very talkative at all. He looks depressed. And then he asks to go to the bathroom a second time. And this time, when he stands up, he tells Sergeant Kurt Sheps, "Just you." And so they walk to the bathroom. And as they get to the bathroom, Kurt Sheps, as you remember, takes the recording device to record whatever conversations they have, and he realizes that Sergeant Sheps has that recording device, and he makes him get rid of it. And then, while in the bathroom, he asked Kurt Sheps, "Take me to my house. You can loosen the handcuffs. I'll act like I'm going for a knife and you can shoot me." Now, Sergeant Sheps told you that he told the defendant that he can't do that. You know, I can't do that. And he said to you that he told the defendant, "Just tell us where the bodies are. Tell us." And what was the defendant's response? "I will never tell you where the bodies are. I will never tell you where the bodies are." This was a statement that was heard by Detective Brian Ford as well. Again, if there was any doubt whatsoever, his statement that he was not going to tell them where the bodies are, and he will never tell the investigators where the bodies are. Should remove whatever doubt you may have in your mind. As to count 3, with regard to the murder of Yesenia Suarez, that third element is that there was an unlawful killing of Yesenia Suarez by an act eminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this element and how the state has proved it. What the judge is going to tell you is, when he reads you those instructions, is that an act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose, and that an act is eminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind if it is an act or a series of acts that, one, a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another, and 2, is done from ill will, hatred, spite, or an evil intent, and 3, is of such a nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. He'll also tell you that in order to convict for second-degree murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove that the defendant had an intent to cause death, the death in this case of Yesenia Suarez. So let's talk about the second of those elements. We'll talk about the second element first, and then the first and third elements together. Number 1 is that this was an act that was done from ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent. What evidence is there of ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent? Well, we know about the deteriorating marriage, that she wanted a divorce and would not change her mind, that he had discovered his wife having an affair. You see these text messages back and forth, and you can see the ill will, the hatred, the spite, the evil intent. You can see it building over time. From October the 13th, when Yesenia Suarez goes to Alabama, and they're exchanging, he's upset that he's at home and she's off with coworkers, and she's out to dinner with them, and she won't talk to him on the phone, that she's more interested in spending time with him than talking to her on the phone. And you see these angry text messages back and forth, and you can see the ill will and the hatred building over time, day after day after day, until he discovers once and for all, and his suspicions are confirmed, that she's having an affair on him. You know about the confrontation at work and insisting on informing her employees of the affair and the text messages. And also the phone call with Sabrina Newell. A 40-minute phone call with Sabrina Newell where all he does is trash Yesenia Suarez. Just trashes her. The evidence is clear, beyond a reasonable doubt, that what motivated him on the in the early morning hours, October the 23rd of 2013, was ill will, hatred, spite, and evil intent. The first and third elements, number 1, that a person of ordinary judgment, that this was an act that a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another, and that it is of such a nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. What evidence is there of that? Well, the defendant says that he killed his wife by striking her in the throat once with his hand. Now, what else did he say in those interviews? Well, on the 24th, he said, I hit her one time. He's sobbing, telling the story. I hit her one time. I crushed her neck. She couldn't breathe. She died. Look at me, begging for air. That's why I never hit her. I never hit her because I know my strength. I know my strength. In the 23rd, in that interview, he's telling the police about his mixed martial arts training. He says, I'm pretty good at what I do. Like, I've multi-trained a lot of things. So, like, I hit a lot harder than what I appear to. I'm very strategic. How I move catches attention. Like, wow. Like, a lot of people told me you should go into MMA. And I was fighting for a while, and I was training out with American top team and things like that. He knew and admits in these interviews that he knew that if he struck his wife in that manner, that he was reasonably certain to either kill her or do serious bodily harm. That's why he said, that's why I never hit her, because I know my strength. You will also get an instruction on the heat of passion. And I'm not going to go through this with you. The judge will read this to you. I'll just simply tell you that it simply does not apply in this particular case. And the reason that it doesn't apply is because, according to the defendant's own statement, when he left the house that night at 1 o'clock in the morning, and he comes back at 3 o'clock, whatever happened in the house, he had an opportunity to cool off. And this does not apply in just any situation where somebody might get mad. This is something has to be an extremely significant event. And nothing of that nature that he describes that night rises to that level. Whereas a sudden event, it's an event so significant that it would drive into a blinding fury, and he had no opportunity to cool off. This instruction, this defense simply does not apply. And then lastly, I want to talk to you as in terms of counts 1, 2, or 3, and that is that the killing was premeditated. This is the last element with regard to first-degree murder as it applies to Michael and Talia Otto. The judge will tell you that killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent must be formed before the killing. And then he'll tell you that the question of premeditation is a question of fact to be determined by you from the evidence. It will be sufficient proof that the circumstances of the killing and the conduct of the accused convince you beyond a reasonable doubt of the existence of premeditation at the time of the killing. So what evidence is there that the killing of Michael and Talia Otto were premeditated? Well, I submit to you that the circumstances and the timing of the killings clearly show premeditation. His description of those murders, the murder of Michael and Talia Otto, was that they came after he murdered Yesenia Suarez. And then the children were killed. And the only reason why they would have been killed was to eliminate them as witnesses. He had killed his wife, and he knew that they were there. They would know. They would know who was in the house, who wasn't in the house. They would know who killed their mother. And they would be in a position to tell someone that. And he had the opportunity to reflect on that. It may have only taken him a few seconds. As soon as this little girl, as he describes, comes running out of the bedroom, what's wrong with mommy? Who's dying? It was that moment that he decided to kill Talia Otto and to kill Michael Otto. Now, count 4, tampering with physical evidence. The judge will tell you that to prove the crime of tampering with physical evidence, the state must prove the following 2 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 1, that Luis Toledo knew that an investigation by a duly constituted prosecuting authority or law enforcement agency of this state was about to be instituted. And number 2, that Luis Toledo altered or destroyed or concealed or removed anything with the purpose to impair its verity or its truth or availability in the investigation or the proceeding. And clearly, this has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. He's got rid of the bodies. He's cleaning up the crime scene. He's getting rid of the car. He's getting rid of evidence from the house, the trunk mat, his clothing, all of this stuff. He knows that as soon as it's discovered that Yesenia Suarez and the children are missing, that there's going to be an investigation. And so he's doing everything he can to cover up that crime and to get rid of any evidence that shows that he had anything to do with it. You will also receive instructions about lesser included offenses, and I'll just briefly touch on these. You'll receive instructions that lesser included offenses to first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and aggravated manslaughter, and the lesser included offense to second-degree murder is simply manslaughter. And with tampering with physical evidence, there are no lesser included offenses. The judge will tell you, when you consider all of these instructions, that when you return a verdict of guilty, it has to be the highest offense that has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And I submit to you that none of these lessers are applicable in this particular case. The appropriate verdict in this case is murder in the first degree with regard to Michael and Talia Otto, and second-degree murder with regard to Yesenia Suarez's murder and tampering with physical evidence. You will receive a verdict form, and it will appear something like this. And we ask you to return a guilty verdict as to all four of those crimes. In this particular case, this is a case about real people. Real people that the defendant killed. His wife, Yesenia Suarez, and her children, all because he was jealous. We don't say that Yesenia Suarez, that the things that she did was right. But it doesn't justify murdering her. And it certainly does not justify killing her children either. And that is what the defendant in this particular case did. And the evidence in this case shows that beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And we ask that you return the verdict that the evidence in this case demands. Thank you very much.